Every single video I've seen of you, you basically state that you create crazy things.
I do. I do.
Do you actually find that you learn more by creating crazy things?
So I'll tell you the metrics talk specifically is like the best example of this ever. And my talks tend to live for a while. The topic will morph a little bit, but you don't start a new talk for every conference that you do. I started a microservices team in like 2016. And so we created a text adventure game and we took that on the road and did workshops with it and all kinds of crazy stuff. And even back then, we talk about observability now, but it was an issue then also. The 12 factors were written a bajillion years ago now. They're not new. And what you do with your log messages and how you observe things, right? That's included in there. You need to know that your application is doing what it's supposed to do. But I never had time to like actually play with it. And I didn't have time to like actually pull up a Prometheus dashboard and write my own queries. Like I just was never getting there. It was something I wanted to do. And enough is enough. I submitted a talk for Spring 1, 2019. About application metrics. And I said, I'm going to do it and I'm going to make myself do it and it's going to be fine. And then over that summer, my son was 10 and he was outside playing with his sister. They were making, sound effects and all those really cool things that they do when they're little. And I'm like, oh, teenage years are going to start soon. Crap. And then they're not going to play anymore and he's going to forget how to pretend. No, my son's going to change, which is inevitable, but whatever. I offered to run a Dungeons & Dragons game as a DM.
I am Dungeon Master.
Which I hadn't really ever played Dungeons & Dragons, to be clear. In my mind, it was just, this is a way to play a game with his friends that would give a little bit of permission to continue having an active imagination and, making pretend kind of normal. I didn't put a limit on how many kids could participate, so I ended up running a Dungeons & Dragons game for 6 10-year-olds. Which was a lot. The reason I mentioned those two things is because it was a kind of a crazy mashup of timing. So that talk I was supposed to give at the end of September. Getting the kids started playing Dungeons & Dragons, I had offered it right at the beginning of the school year. Smart mom. So I had to learn all of the Dungeons & Dragons rules and learn application metrics and Prometheus and queries. And I'm like, what did I just do to myself? Why did I do this? Why was this a good plan? I don't know. So this application that I wrote was imaginatively called Monster Combat, which is the most ridiculous thing I have ever made. And it sucks in a whole bunch of Dungeons & Dragons monster statistics. Then it randomly grabs from 2 to 6 monsters, makes them all fight, takes turns. I don't remember if I did. I don't think I did proper initiative order. Maybe I did. I don't remember. But anyway, it's like lots of dice rolling, makes them all fight until there's only one left.
There can be only one.
It's just that's what happens. And so from an application metrics perspective, right, it's like how much damage do they do? The attack used, was it successful? Was it not successful? Was it a melee attack and then it's against the person's armor class, or was it area of effect DC based hit, right? So it's like I was keeping track of all of that. I had like what kind of monster, things I was measuring about any given attack, any given round, how many rounds in the encounter. When I gave my talk, I was like, here's the kinds of things I can start looking at from an aggregate perspective, because metrics are all about aggregates. So the whole point was, here's why you're talking about aggregates. Here's why you're not doing audit controls, but here's what I could learn because of this stupid thing. That was all spring, which meant it was all micrometer. So my plan, because of course applications evolve, for my next talk, which was supposed to be Dev Nexus in 2000, right before the wall came down and we all went home sick. For that talk, what I had wanted was to take microprofile metrics and micrometer and be like, look, I can use them together and I can have aggregates from either and everybody wins and we're all happy. Because I built this ludicrous, stupid, way off the cut and paste path application, I discovered that at the time, NP Metrics was actually doing bad math. I couldn't calculate averages. I had no sum. I had a count, but I didn't have a sum. They were pre-computing percentiles, which are not aggregable at all. You can't aggregate them anywhere. Right? I mean, it was like I'm like, how are you guys publishing this as an okay thing? Like, you are not doing statistically valid math. I hate statistics, just by the way. It is my least favorite thing. But even I knew this was wrong, right? It's like, what are you doing?
I've seen developers do averages of percentages before.
But yeah.
And I'm confused that that's not a thing.
It's not a thing.
That's not a thing!
You can do histograms, like sending histogram buckets. You can aggregate histogram buckets because it's sums of sums. That's allowed. But if you can't aggregate percentiles, because your percentile is only relevant to the process that it was measured in, right? The 99th percentile on that one process is not the same as the 99th percentile in another process, because the whole scale's different depending on the range that was observed. They didn't figure it out because they only ever used HTTP throughput, which is the cut and paste example from the internet. So it's like, if I hadn't gone off and done something that deliberately prohibited every possible, like just cut and paste what the internet tells you to do, I can't say I wouldn't have figured it out, but I know that I did figure it out because I was having to write it all myself. Every query in Prometheus, I had to write all of the, like, what my average attack should be. I couldn't just take existing metrics. Like with Micrometer, there's very well known, here's your HTTP server metrics and here's what they're called. And you can cut and paste any Prometheus query. There's all kinds of examples. There isn't one for average attack damage, right? There isn't one for setting up a distribution summary about what a hit did in an encounter. There wasn't one of those. So I had to write it. And in writing all of that stuff is when I figured out, like, no, what are you doing? This math is not good. The most recent stuff is, some of it is plugging knowledge of things that I maybe could have come across earlier, but I didn't. And I enjoy it because then again, I'm not just cutting and pasting. I'm actually having to learn something about what I'm doing. Like actually learn it, not just pretend. I don't know. I don't like not actually knowing what I'm doing, especially if I'm going to stand up on a stage and talk about it. I want to have gotten all the bloody noses and all the black eyes from doing it wrong, trying to make it work. The most recent talk I did actually use ChatGPT a lot because I was trying to conquer rewriting my data model, and I kept having a real hard time on wrapping my head around what I was doing. And then I was also trying to bring in Apache Camel. It's a very different way of looking at the world, right? I was always writing in the app server. And if you're using Camel or some of the other integration products, you're in the glue in between the application server. So the whole way you chain all this stuff together is very different. And I found ChatGPT didn't always give me the answer that I wanted, but it filled in the words I needed to find the answer that I wanted. I just didn't have the vocabulary. Like Hibernate has great documentation. And then you go and read it and you're like, I don't know if that's what I'm looking for or not. But then you could type that same question in ChatGPT and it would get you a lot closer. And you'd be like, that is what I'm looking for.
Yeah. You eventually find what it is they call it.
Exactly.
Well, that concludes part 2 of my conversation with Erin Schnobel. If you'd like to hear the first part, that's available on the channel. If you've enjoyed this, then please consider clicking like and maybe subscribing to the channel. Thank you very much for your support. We hope to see you next time.